So can you, for the people that are just starting out with drift diving, can you
Sure.
give a kind of an overview of what drift diving is and what's the difference in drift diving and anchor diving?
There's several differences. Anchor diving is one fixed, location. So what you're doing is you're throwing your anchor down, or a lot of charter dive boats will put a big mooring ball, and they'll have sort of a chain and an anchor, not really an anchor, but a chain that they'll clip onto a wreck. When they do wreck diving, a lot of the charter boats will anchor to it or attach to it, so that it's a fixed location. They expect only to stay on that wreck. Even when I wreck dive, I like to bounce the wreck, hit it, and then I'll go to a reef that's near the wreck or do multiple wrecks. See, that's kind of the way I look at it. I can cover more territory. So drift diving means that the boat, which you have people in the boat operating the vessel, so there's a key component there. I had 5 guys on the boat today. All 5 of those guys know how to run my boat. They're very familiar with running a boat. I actually had a buddy of mine that has a boat that was out with me on Monday, and we were doing a little bit of scouting. Super nice guy, but he's not familiar with what our procedures are on my boat. I've never been on his boat. He's sort of a new chiefy crew member. So I was hesitant to leave him to run the boat. So I had my other buddy, Ken, running the boat with Chris and explaining to him while we were down diving what we're doing and what we're looking for. The main thing that you as a boat operator is to follow that flag and to protect your divers. You need to, those folks out there, they are just not really in tune. The other boaters, fishermen, they're just unaware of what a dive flag is. So, you have a boat, I always put my boat between the other boat that's coming towards me and the dive flag. So my job as the boat operator when I'm drift diving and following that flag is to protect my divers. So, so I can get into it. You want to cover this a little bit, Jessica, about dive flags?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The key is, and it is a rule, it's the state of Florida that as a diver, you need to be within 300 feet of your flag, and boaters need to stay around 300 feet from a dive flag. So it's more of an awareness thing of why you want to have a dive flag, what its purpose is. So if we all stay away, the divers stay within 300 feet. And then the other thing is, like, let's say, we always use the buddy system. 2 guys are diving, 2 guys are in the boat. That's 4 people. So that's kind of our way to do it. I like redundancy. God forbid, the guy in the boat, you got one guy, he happens to have a problem, he loses sight of the flag, or he gets this, somehow something happens. So you at least have somebody else in the boat. That is our optimum way to actually do drift diving. 2 guys in the boat that are following the flag, and the 2 buddies that are diving. And then it's your turn. You flip it around. The other 2 guys that were diving, they're now operating the boat. So the guys do need to be aware of how to run a boat and your particular boat. Little things that your boat maybe does that, and where all the safety equipment is, what happens, those kind of things. Those are the types of things that you want to make everyone aware of.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I've seen out on the water too is the understanding of what a dive flag is. So some people will pull around a buoy. So is that okay?
Pull around a buoy. Well, just like a red buoy.
Yeah, that's not. flag.
it's not, I don't think it's really giving the boater, the other boater, awareness that you know you're a dive flag. That dive flag with the red and the white stripe is kind of telling you, hey, there's a diver there. That's what its purpose is. Sometimes when you have a buoy, I think you're not communicating what it is. Now, listen, every once in a while somebody will get lost, right? You know, the divers will get separated. We all carry what we call safety sausages. So we'll have a reel and we'll throw up the safety sausage to let the boat know where we are. And a lot of the guys will actually, my guys are pretty good, very experienced divers. They're very comfortable diving alone. So they'll shoot up a safety sausage so the boat knows, hey, they got separated. There's a safety sausage, meaning, well, that's that guy. And then here's the guy with the flag. As we always say, the guy with the flag is never lost, you know. So try to stick with those things, but we always, just in case, we have a safety sausage, which is okay, you know, and that's a good warning device as well. But remember, a lot of boaters don't know what that is.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen that happen too, that people are just flying through like a reef zone and in a boat, then they're not divers, so they don't know what a safety sausage is, and they actually get closer to try to figure out what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are guys that don't dive, you know, that dive without flags. They dive without flags. Some operations do that. It depends on the amount of boat traffic and things like that. Here in the greater Fort Lauderdale area, you know, and even in Palm Beach County, it's a pretty heavily, you know, cruising industry up and down. You know, so I would hope that folks do know what a dive flag is, but there's still plenty of people that are not aware of it. You're right.
There's something that I see too is, so I've been driving the boat plenty, and when my divers are, of course, they're underwater, they don't know that there's a charter boat right above them, and they kind of drift into like a charter boat. And inevitably the charter boat is kind of unhappy that there are divers around, and then I've got to stay close to the dive flag, but I don't want to get too close to the dive boat. Well, I mean, to the charter boat. What do you suggest to drivers when that happens?
Yeah, I actually try to communicate with that other boat to say, hey, you know, my divers are down here, and you should be aware of where the bubbles are versus where your flag is. Free diving is a whole different ball game. You got plenty of free divers that don't use bubbles, and they're down 3, 4, 5 minutes. These good guys, you know, these really guys that know what they're doing, and you know, those just pop up unexpectedly. They don't have bubbles, so that's another challenge. But I think the best thing to do is just communicate with that charter boat and say, hey, you know, we didn't know. You know, my divers are here. Apologize. We didn't know, you know, we were going to drift into you. And the other thing is, you know, they shouldn't be anchored on a reef anyway. So they're kind of like not where they're supposed to be. So, you know, that's one of those things. Hopefully they have enough sense to, if they are anchored, they're anchored in the sand and they're actually drifting over the reef to, you know, fish or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point too, and I think we'll bring that up again later as well. But about not anchoring on reefs, and then kind of going into our next slide here, making sure you keep the dive flag in sight. I have seen it when this picture is so nice and beautiful and flat.
Right.
So you kind of think like, how could you not keep the dive flag?
Correct. It's right there. Yeah. How can you miss it?
But I've definitely seen it on days when the waves are choppy enough that it is very easy to lose sight.
Yeah, and I think first of all, where we are, Palm Beach and in Fort Lauderdale area, I know you have kind of a worldwide participation here, so this may not be relevant, but our reefs are very close to the shoreline, and so there's not a whole lot of distance for all that reef and diving to go on. So you have a lot of activity, fishermen, cruising, boat cruisers, and also divers. So you really kind of have to be respectful of everybody, because you are kind of all crammed in here in the same spot. So that's really the point. But your role as the boat operator is to maintain visual of the flag. You should also be aware of where your guys are going to dive. Like, you know, what's the plan for the dive? And I'll do that on like a briefing. You know, we're going to hit this reef. I'm going to be in 50 feet. And then we may go out east, and it may be a little deeper. So at least they know that, hey, I'm on the third reef, and that's pretty much where I'm going to be. So those kind of things, to pass that information along to everybody as a little briefing before you go in, is very helpful.
Agreed.
Yep.
I think definitely having a plan at the beginning, and then making sure that everybody knows it, not just the people that are diving. I've seen a lot of times when my friends will all go out and everybody's excited, and we just kind of like, okay, we're going, see ya. We jump in, and nobody really had an idea what the other person was thinking.
Right. And that's, you know, it's funny because I hear that a lot. I really do. You know, I have guys that dive on other people's boats all the time and back and forth, and still jump on my boat, and they're appreciative of the fact of I communicate. I like to let them know what we're doing and what our expectations are. Hey, but things go wrong. You know, that flag, I've had it where it came apart. The reel came apart from the flag, and all of a sudden the boat was following the flag, and because of the wind, it started going in. Well, the guys were at least sensible enough to realize on the boat that, hey, why are they over sand? They wouldn't be diving over sand, you know, all this time. So they realized, oh, no, they must have somehow got separated. In the meantime, we, the divers, realized, uh-oh, we lost the flag, so we shot up a safety sausage. So just knowing each other is really helpful, and what to expect. So we do a lot of that. We communicate a lot. We don't say we're 100% perfect, because there's another slide here pretty soon that shows you when sometimes things do go wrong.
Well, I'm looking forward to that one.
That's the next one, I think.
Oh, yeah? You want to go ahead and talk about that then?
Sure, there you go. Happen to see the Coast Guard in the background, do you?
Oh, yes. And that's what the book is for.
Well, we're kind of blaming each other, you know. That's Andy, my buddy. He's on the picture of the Catching the Spirit, the ABCs of spearfishing. And we were diving together right off of Fort Lauderdale. And the boat operator was actually following 3 sets of divers. So we actually put 3 sets of divers down, 3 flags. So there's kind of a challenge there, you know. So, and he's usually pretty good. Well, we went with the current. That's our story, and we're sticking with it. The current was going south. The other 2 guys, the other 2 divers, sets of divers, they went north. Now, they were saying that the current was north. I find that hard to believe, you know. So we ended up going south. The other 2 sets of divers went north. By the time we all surfaced, we were a good far bit apart, well over a mile apart. And it was a little bumpy out there. So when we surfaced, we couldn't see the boat, and they couldn't see us. So we inflate the safety sausage as well. It gives you something to kind of float on. And we're hanging there and figuring hopefully they're going to show up. And my buddy Andy has one of those lifelines. Great little lifeline. It's a VHF radio that a diver can carry. Well, we have the old style. He has the old style. And he was able to, he had to actually talk on the radio, and they couldn't hear us. The boat couldn't hear us. You had that option. You can actually go on either 16, which is the universal kind of emergency channel type of thing, or 18. We have 18, which is a lot of the dive boats monitor 18. And of course, this was during the week, so there was not another boat around. So we're kind of going, and then we finally decide, you know, we've been up for about a good 30 minutes, and nobody's come to see us yet. So we hit the red button. the red button sends out a signal and your GPS locations to other UHF radios in the vicinity. And that's how the Coast Guard got us. And so by the time the Coast Guard showed up, which was great, we're very appreciative. Towboat US also showed up first, and then the Coast Guard, and then our boat finally showed up. So, of course, you know, everybody was safe, and we were blaming each other. But so everything doesn't always go exactly according to plan on drift diving. So that is one of the challenges of drift diving. You need to kind of stay with the flag. The boat does need to stay with the flag. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and a great picture, by the way.
Yeah, I think we posted that on Facebook, and there were numerous comments, you know, that kind of thing.
Sure. Actually, your story reminded me of a story, and I guess I can kind of go along with the expert tips, even though I don't know that I would call this an expert tip, but it's definitely something that we learned the hard way. We were out on the Gulf Coast once, and so it was it was flat, but the way the sun was, it was casting the rays against the water, so the boat driver couldn't see, and instead of going further away so that they would hopefully put where they thought the diver would come up on the other side of the sun, they were looking directly into the sun. So it was about 45 minutes before they picked us up. So I think that's another interesting and probably important point, is that if you're looking for a diver and you think that the person might have surfaced directly into the sun, like you have to look into the sun to see them, then go toward the sun so you can look back into the darker water, and you're more likely to be able to see the dive flag in certain situations. So if you don't see them, maybe try not looking into the sun.
Yeah, I mean, and that is a challenge. And we drift dive down in the Dry Tortugas off of a liveaboard boat. It's Memorial Day weekend for the Chiefy crew. Same captain that we've had for such a long time. And quite honestly, he doesn't use flags. And so there's 5 pair of divers. There's 10 of us. And when we surface, we're supposed to inflate our sausage. And we have these whistles, and they're hooked up to your air source. And so the whistle gives him sort of a position. He can hear, oh, you're in that direction, and then he looks for the sausage. But his role is to stay away so that he can then visualize where everybody is. So he doesn't want to run somebody over to pick us up. So we'll kind of hang there for a while. But he'll make that point. Hey, listen, the sun is setting, and when you guys surface over here, I'm not going to see you as well. So take that into consideration. So absolutely, yep. Good point. Good point. But I do like that picture with with Andy and I, with the Coast Guard in the background, and it was kind of a fun story, and of course we had a good laugh about it.
That is definitely a classic.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the limitations to anchor diving, and why?
Yeah. Well, actually, there was just a story, I think last week, a couple guys that were Coast Guard guys in North Carolina went out on a small boat. They anchored, they dove, they came up, and the boat was gone. Whoops. And that's what happens. Sometimes somehow the anchor kind of became separated from the boat, and the boat drifted away.
Wow. And that's really bad in North Carolina, because you go like 30 miles offshore.
Right. So the good news is for them, they had actually filed a float plan with one of their buddies. And when they realized that it's a little too long, and they did that. They had their BCDs, they inflated them, and then they had safety sausages, which they rested on. But when they surfaced, they had no boat. So, and it was just the 2 of them. So so that's probably the number one limitation of anchor diving, is the reason typically why you're doing that is no one's in the boat, and you don't know what's going to happen to your boat while you're up, you're down there. That's number one issue. A big wave could come up. A lot of folks don't know scope as far as your anchor line. You should use a lot of scope, because you never know when you're going to have that little storm blow through and kick up the waves. And the number one thing, if you are going to anchor dive, hey, listen, if you're in 10 feet of water, a lot of the guys in the Keys will just anchor dive. They'll throw the anchor over, and they've got like a favorite coral head, and they're going to lobster at that coral head. I get it. That makes absolute sense. So the number one thing is you want to make sure that your anchor is secured and your anchor line is secured to your boat. So that's a top priority. So that's number one limitation. Number two limitation, like today, we had sort of a north current. I'll say a sort of, meaning it wasn't very strong, but I certainly didn't want to go against the current. So really what happens then is the proper procedure, if you are anchor diving, is to actually go against the current in the beginning, because that's when you're the strongest, in the beginning of your dive. As the dive gets a little longer, you're a half hour underwater, then you want to drift back to your boat with the current. So that's the technique most people use when they anchor dive. But then you have to have pretty doggone good navigational skills to find your boat. So those are probably your biggest limitations as being a diver, and using and anchor diving. And realize that you're kind of covering the same territory. You're going against the current initially, and maybe you're going to go a little while. You're going to be down there for 20, 30 minutes and use a half a tank of air. And then all of a sudden, then you're going to drift the other way. So there are challenges to that, as far as anchor diving and with the currents. And a lot of times you can't really tell what the currents are going to do down there. I mean, we all, I'll look at buoys. We have these buoys for reefs, and I'll look at them and see if we have a north current or a south current. But sometimes it's inaccurate of how strong that current is.
Agreed. And there have been many times that I've been diving out here off the Boynton Inlet or around there, Boca Boynton area, that I could not even imagine trying to swim against the current. Like
right.
If we weren't drift diving, there wouldn't be a dive, or I just would never make it back to the boat.
Correct. And I think that's probably the most dangerous, limitation. I would say that most mini seasons we hear of that, where somebody, got separated from their boat, and most of the time it's because they were anchor diving. But that's not to say that, hey, things happen. But yes, I do believe that that's one of the things that you want to be careful of, because you've got to have great navigational skills. You've got to be able to go against the current, and you got to make sure that your boat is well secured with the anchor and the anchor line, so that it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah.
And I can't help but think about the beginning of that movie, Fool's Gold, where he's diving. The main character, I think it's Matthew McConaughey, that was diving, and he heard, like, he felt this thump while he was on the bottom, and he was just like, and didn't think anything of it, and he got up to the surface, and his boat had sunk.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, that's a big oops.
Yeah. Anchor diving is good for a fixed location. I threw this slide in. This was actually taken by the Lady Luck crew. They were just doing this the other day. It's off of Pompano, and it's they were doing a little poker tournament on the deck of the Lady Luck. It was kind of cool. My buddy Jeff Thoreau, who owns South Florida Diving Headquarters, who organized it, did a great job. And I think they had 5 or 6 guys down there that were diving. They dove it, and they were playing a poker tournament type of thing. It was pretty cool. But this is a fixed location. So what they'll do, a lot of charter boats, they'll have a buoy and the dive master will dive down and attach the line to the wreck. And that's sort of a different scenario as far as the divers are concerned, because you're staying on that wreck. That's the whole purpose, is you are going to fight the current. You are going to stay on that wreck. That's the whole point. And then you're going to come back up that same anchor line. So, you know, that works well if you are working a fixed location.
Yeah, agreed. I think you had mentioned before that when you dive a wreck, you tend to either dive multiple wrecks or you dive a wreck and then a reef,
Yep.
which is great for drift diving. That's what we always did too, because there are a lot of places, especially in South Florida. South Florida is really good for this, I guess, that you can do multiple wrecks in one dive, or there's a line of rocks that you can do off of the wreck, or there's just so many options and combinations of the wreck dives that it's so tempting to even, like you said, to drift dive the wrecks as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, for me, wreck diving is great for spearfishing. That's typically where we're going to go grouper hunting or whatever. And I like to hit it where you're doing 2 or 3 wrecks. And, you know, hey, if the current is very mild, great. Then, you know, I can go to those, you know, 2 or 3 wrecks, 4 wrecks, turn around and come back. So, you know, we'll do that as well. So they do have a lot of what you call, or Jessica, you mentioned, they're called wreck treks. And that's the whole purpose, is you start at one, work your way to the next, and they'll actually have little breadcrumbs, either little rocks or something that somebody's placed there over a period of time, or some steel rebar to kind of show you the direction of where the next wreck is. And those are great. And they're not in very deep of water, you know, 65, 70 feet of water. And they're real nice. Or, like I say, hit a wreck and then jump off and hit the reef. So that's always great.
Yeah, right. And I think that kind of leads us right into lobstering, because
Yep.
if you're drift diving, and then you get to cover a lot of territory, which is great for lobstering.
Right. And that's really the whole point of lobstering, is I do always have sort of a plan when it comes even to my reefs. I very rarely do any lobstering on wrecks. You very rarely find any. There are lobsters do end up in those wrecks occasionally. They don't last very long because those wrecks do get hit pretty hard by a lot of divers. But I will say that what we're doing is when we actually, like today, I hit a place called Honey Rock. Okay, so Honey Rock yielded 4 lobster in Honey Rock, and then there's 2 other little locations as I have a north drift that I wanted to hit. So we were able to get a couple more in each of those other locations. So that whole drift was a north drift. We would not have been able to do that if we had anchor dived. So that was the point of being drift diving. We covered the area. We knew exactly where we were. The boat knew where we were, and we were good to go. Oh, dive with a plan. Exactly. Oh, there's Jay. He's got his plan. I don't know. He was pretty courageous when he volunteered to do this, but
that's a lot of spines.
Those spiny lobster do hurt, and I would not encourage this. You know, I use a full wetsuit, even though the water temperature today was 84 degrees, and for sure we wear gloves because those spines do hurt, little spiny lobster. But we do like to have a plan. We'll try to hit, you know, hey, if I got a north drift and this is where we're going to go, there's 3 or 4 spots that we're going to try to hit. If I have a south drift, oh, great, because those are a whole different set of little spots that we can hit. But there'll be 3 or 4 that we'll be hitting. So, and it's kind of weird. You have a south drift, the reef looks different. It's the same reef, but it looks different because you're going in a different direction. And most of the time we have a north drift here. And I think that's just because of the Gulf Stream is predominantly going north. And then there would be some eddies that come off, and occasionally we'll turn and we get those south currents. The south currents are usually yield better visibility. And we always like to see that as well. So when we have a south drift, we have a we have a big smile on our face because we can get to go to different locations and a different setup. All right.
Yeah. And you see.
Yeah, there we go. Covering more reef gets more bugs. Yes. And exactly the point. My picture's over here to the lower left, and I've got a bag of bugs, and you know, I'm holding on to the dive flag. So you know, I'm just showing off there on our safety stop. And of course, back on the boat, you know, we all get to take our pictures with lobster, with the bugs, and of course, we're trying to catch the bugs. You know how that goes. We're trying to catch the bug, so it's fun.
Is the bottom of your bag tied up with rope?
Yes.
I see that.
And there's a reason for that, you know. So how many lobster catchers have actually had either the Velcro, they left the Velcro undone, or they had the zipper undone? Huh? Yes, we've all been there. So I do have a rope on the bottom of that bag, and I tie it off to make sure that they're not going to, well, you know, they're the one-way little check valve, you know, on that bag. Lobsters go in, it's the hotel. The guests check in, but don't check out. But they will check out if you leave the back door open. So, yeah.
Indeed. Yeah,
Yes.
I did that to my husband once. I emptied the bag and we got on the boat and I unzipped the bottom of the bag and let all of them, you know, out and then forgot to zip it back up. So he was diving along, putting lobsters in, and his friend on the next dive, his friend was right behind him picking up every one of those. And he finished his dive and he had not one lobster in his bag and his friend was packed.
Now, did his friend share? Did his friend share with him? I mean, you know.
Thankfully.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. But it must have been quite humorous, right?
Oh, yeah. I was not the most popular person on the boat with my husband.
I was going to say, hubby gave you a hard time, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm always looking for the cluster of lobster. Now, it was kind of interesting this year. You know, I've got a lot of different guys that, you know, we catch, we're out lobstering, a lot of different boats. And really nobody could find a mother lode, you know, where we could be drinking beer at 7:30 in the morning, you know. So we really had to work for them today. You know, we didn't really finish till around noon. And yeah, it was terrible, you know. So
you were out there. I think I saw that you dropped in at 6:45 or something like that.
6:26 was the first two guys. Yeah, it was just at the crack of dawn, as they say. And we jumped in, and we just never found the mother lode. You know, there was 8 here, 3 there, you know, 4 there, a couple here, a couple there, but we just never really found the 40 in one hole. So, and we've done that in the past. We've actually, you know, there've been several mini seasons where we were able to jump in. We knew, well, we didn't have done some scouting and they were there and we just cleaned them up and that was it. We went home. So that makes for a great day, you know? So today was a great day still, but we just had to work a little harder for it.
Have you found any pattern for where you find holes that just have tons of them in it? Or is it kind of hit or miss?
That's a good question. That goes to find the lobster first. I always give this couple little tips. I'm looking for active parts of the reef. So you'll notice that some parts of the reef are kind of not dead, but they just don't have a lot of marine life. There'll be reef, but you won't have a lot of fish. But then you'll find areas that have a lot of marine life, a lot of small fish. Big fish will bring you into the small fish. Eels are, you know, moray eels, little black spotted eels are great ones. Probably the biggest one that we found are those lionfish. Lionfish and lobster cohabitate. So when you see an area with a lot of lionfish, look for lobster. Flip side, when you see lobster, be careful because there's going to be probably lionfish in that same area. So it's funny how even eels, they like to be in the same area with lobster, and lobster like to be in the same area as the eels. And the eel will eat the lobster, you know, but they kind of have their little spots figured out. And so that's actually what I am looking for is a more active part of the reef. Another little tip is I like to work an edge, you know, where the sand and the reef meet. So what I'm looking for is sort of a white, sandy, whiter sand part of the reef. And so you'll kind of investigate. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there was a, you know, an eel there, or maybe there's some lobster there. So, but it is funny that those areas that what I'll do is I'll mark them. So if I find clusters together and it's an active part of the reef, what I'll do is I'll pull the flag a bunch of times, and the boat should know, if they're paying attention, that to mark that spot. So they'll come over, and that's how I have, you know, some good spots, because I go, this is potentially good. And it doesn't necessarily have to have lobster at the time, but you go, wait, in this area is just, there's a lot of fish, a lot of activity, sand, some white sand, and I'll mark that spot, and we'll come back to it and see how it does throughout the years. And what we do find is sometimes you'll find them in year after year after year, but they don't typically, you know, stay in that same spot every year. So you do have to have a bunch of spots. That is one of the things that I have noticed is we'll have one area that'll be great for a couple of years, then it'll shut off and you won't do well there for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden they come back and they're there again.
Huh, interesting.
Yep.
I think that's a good point about kind of following the edge of the reef, so where the reef and sand are, because I think that's another kind of going back to the drift diving and how you can cover more area. That way you don't have to like focus on one area and you only get to stay on the edge of the reef for just a couple minutes. You can follow the edge of the reef for as long as you have air. You can follow it because you don't have to go back or stay in one particular place when you're drift diving. I think that's a huge advantage to drift diving too if you're lobstering. Oops.
Yep.
So
this was the picture to the left is a mini season many moons ago, but I probably should have put a bunch of, there's other, you know, other mini season pictures. Usually the first day, you know, it's the same 5 guys: Roger, Andy, Chuck, Braden. He went to Texas, so we were able to bring John in. So it's the same guys. That's the other thing, you know. And I do have a next guy. Ken's going to be the next guy that'll take over if one of these guys drop out, you know. So we have the same group of guys that we've been diving with mini season the whole time, you know. And tomorrow, guess what? It'll be the same 5 guys. We'll be out again. We probably won't get our limit tomorrow, but we're going to actually hit some spots that we didn't hit today. You never know. And we will actually do some spearfishing tomorrow too, just because of all the activity with lobstering on that second reef, and that's really where they were hit hard today. You'll see that there'll be a lot more fish in, grouper, muttons. They'll be hanging around. So it's a good opportunity to do some spearfishing on the second day of mini season. Oh, and we always get some green snares, you know, those green lobster snares. You know, I find them, they're brand new. They still have the price tag on them, and I sell them at the flea market, you know. So combination of green snares and anchors, you know, I could retire again, you know.
Yeah, every year we find the snares, tickle sticks, and every now and then an anchor. I think I have like 3 or 4 anchors right now. So if you want to sell a couple anchors for me, you know where to come.
Okay, there you. I'm well in the at least 15 now. So
wow.
yeah. Well, we dive a lot, so you know, I'd say we pull up an anchor every couple of weeks. It's well, and that's a designation, by the way, for the Chiefy crew. If you do get an anchor and it's a good one, you could be king of the reef, you know, or queen of the reef, you know. So we definitely, that's a big point, you know, big point. If it's a good anchor, you could be king of the reef or queen of the reef.
Yeah, yeah, and you can make the gas money back too.
There you go. Absolutely. We like that part. All right. So this is my book, Catching the Bug, second edition. The first edition, I mean, hey, we sold out of the first edition, so somebody must be buying these. And you know, the good news is, Jessica, and I forgot, and I didn't realize, I've done a lobster catching seminar now, leading up a bunch of dive shops. I did the Fort Lauderdale Yacht Club last week. I did Bug Fest last night. Did lobster catching seminars. I go over the book and have the book available for sale and all that good stuff. And I keep forgetting that there's new divers and new people wanting to know how to catch lobsters. So it works out well. It's an easy to read book. It's got a lot of good pictures, a lot of great stories. And I rewrote the whole second edition, added new chapters. Chiefy goes global. So we talk about how to get lobster all over the world. So this is really big.
Nice. And this is a really fun book to read. It's not like this is what you do, step one, step two. It's full of stories and all kinds of like really great information mixed in with the stories. So it's just really entertaining also. So
well, it was funny because when I decided to write the first edition, it was my first book ever, you know. And my buddies encouraged me to say, man, you should write a book because you know, you have a lot of pictures of catching lobster, and that's what I like to do is catch lobster and underwater hunt and spear fish, you know. So I said, well, let me take a look, see what that's all about. And really a lot of the catching lobster, there were a lot of them for like marine biologists. And that's all right. I do have some information on, you know, lobsters and things like that, but the majority is how to find them, catch them, and eat them. So I have different chapters, and they have summaries at the very end. So it's very easy to read, a lot of good pictures, and a lot of good stories, and most of them are true. So yeah, you can buy it at my website, chiefy.net or amazon.com, or most of the dive shops have them now. Most of them from Orlando, I'd say even down to the Keys. I do have an international distributor, so most of the dive shops can get a hold of it if they want to buy it.
Yep, and also Chiefy joined us previously for another webinar specifically on lobstering, and we go through all those chapters, the 3 steps that he talks about, even into cleaning and cooking them. So yep. On the Navionics YouTube channel, you can also find that webinar as well. I know Chiefy's done a lot of seminars and webinars on this stuff because he is quite the expert. So thank you so much for joining us, Chiefy. As always, it was a pleasure and so informative and full of great stories. Thank you to Navionics for sponsoring the webinar. And again, as we said at the beginning, you can go onto the Navionics YouTube channel in a couple of days, and the webinar recording will be available on the YouTube channel. You'll also receive an email follow-up. If you have any questions, definitely send me an email in response to the email follow-up or in response to your registration link, and it'll come to me. And if I can't answer it, then I will consult with the expert, with Chiefy, and he can help answer your questions as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll give you just a couple seconds to type in any questions that you might have right now. I don't see any coming in yet. So if we don't have any questions here, I'm happy to answer questions over email. And also we do have not just sailing and diving webinars on the Navionics YouTube channel. We also have bass fishing and navigating and cruising and everything you could ever think of as a webinar on the Navionics YouTube channel. So if there's anything water related you're interested in, check that out for sure. So thank you so much again, Chiefy, for joining us, and
loved it. Enjoyed it. All right. Awesome. Hey, what's your baby? Are we still on or can we, oh, okay.
We'll call.
Yep.